Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, the U.S. Dockworkers strike is over for now. Both sides have agreed to end a 3-day work stoppage that had paralyzed trade on the East and Gulf coasts and threatened to become a factor in the presidential election. The International Longshoremen's Association and the U.S. Maritime Alliance have extended their previous contract through January 15th. We get more from Bloomberg's Kate Davidson.
One of the things that they wanted were greater protections against the kind of automation that we've seen at ports on the West Coast. So that was a real sticking point. This tentative agreement doesn't address that, but it does go some way toward addressing some of the wage demands. So they've agreed to a temporary deal that would at least allow them to start moving cargo again. And that was under some fairly intense pressure from the White House, I think, over the past few days. And in the meantime, between now and January 15th, they'll have to keep working on that broader contract agreement.
Bloomberg's Kate Davidson says the two sides will restart negotiations today on a long-term agreement, which would include a pay increase of about 62%.
Well, Nathan, we want to get you updated now on the latest developments in the Middle East. Israel has carried out huge bombing raids overnight near Beirut airport aimed at Hezbollah commanders and facilities. Yesterday, oil surged after President Biden said the U.S. was discussing whether to support potential Israeli attacks on Iranian oil infrastructure.
Do you support Israel striking Iran's oil facilities, sir?
We're in discussion of that. I think that would be a little, anyway.
And that was President Biden speaking to reporters outside the White House yesterday. Stuart Livingstone-Wallace, the head of Bloomberg News' Middle East and North Africa coverage, has more on Israel's options.
The oil facilities do remain an option, and they are, to some extent, quite vulnerable. You know, a lot of it's concentrated, particularly on the export terminal at Karg Island, well within the capabilities of Israel's military. However, it does have very serious consequences both for the global economy and particularly, you know, when the run-up to the U.S. elections. And the last thing I suspect the U.S. administration wants is, you know, a sudden rise in gas prices at the pump.
And Bloomberg's Stuart Livingstone-Wallace says the Middle East accounts for about a third of the world's oil supply, and Iran is the third largest producer in OPEC.
Now, Karen, let's turn to the latest in the presidential race. Former President Donald Trump plans to hold a rally tomorrow in Butler, Pennsylvania, the same site where a gunman tried to take his life in July. Trump was in Saginaw, Michigan yesterday, railing against the Biden administration's border policies.
Your borders will be gone forever. They already are when you think of it, right? We don't have any borders. You're a border state now. You know that. Welcome. Congratulations.
As for tomorrow's Pennsylvania event, there is a special guest, Elon Musk. The billionaire posted on X that he will be there to support Trump. The rally will come exactly 1 month before Election Day.
Meanwhile, Nathan, Vice President Kamala Harris is getting support of her own on the campaign trail from Republican Liz Cheney.
A broad coalition has come together to support Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, we may disagree on some things, but we are bound together by the one thing that matters to us as Americans more than any other, and that's our duty to our Constitution.
And the former Congresswoman and longtime Trump critic joined Harris in Ripon, Wisconsin, the town where the Republican Party was founded. Harris says Cheney's endorsement matters a great deal.
It is so admirable when anyone does it, and especially when it is difficult to do in an environment such as this. But Liz Cheney really is a leader who puts country above party and above self, a true patriot.
And before this event, former President Trump told Fox News that Cheney's support would hurt Harris. He called the former Congresswoman a, quote, stupid war hawk.
And Karen, as the campaign enters its home stretch, Harris is about to get even more support on the stump from Barack Obama. The Harris campaign says the former president will spend the final 4 weeks before Election Day campaigning for the vice president and other Democrats starting next Thursday in Pittsburgh. Obama is kicking off his fall campaigning a little earlier than he did 4 years ago. He waited till October 21st to hold his first in-person event for his former vice president, Joe Biden.
Well, let's turn to the markets now, Nathan. And futures, they're little change this morning ahead of the key jobs report. Economists are looking for a gain of 150,000 jobs in September. We get a preview from Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
Will it be a case of hard to forecast or just a hardy economy? Bloomberg's Economist Survey has estimates ranging from 70,000 to 220,000. The consensus is hiring will be little changed from last month, a bit slower than a few months ago, but not collapsing. Unemployment is forecast to be unchanged. But a big miss either way would not be a huge surprise. September payrolls tend to undershoot the consensus, but other labor market data are consistent with an unusually high gain. So a wide range of market reactions is possible. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Mike, thanks. Checking the richness scoreboard, Jeff Bezos is no longer the world's second richest person. More on that from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
Mark Zuckerberg is now in the number 2 spot on the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. His net worth is just over $206 billion, $1.1 billion ahead of Bezos. Even so, Zuckerberg is still behind Elon Musk by nearly $50 billion. So why the change in net worth rankings? Well, the value of Zuckerberg's 13% stake in Meta Platforms keeps rising. It's due in part to his big bet on the metaverse. At first, it looked like a colossal bust, but it appears to have paid off. So far this year, Meta shares are up more than 64%, and the stock closed Thursday at an all-time high. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Doug, thank you. Well, staying in the tech sector, ARK Investments CEO Cathie Wood joins Bloomberg Business Week today, right after the closing bell, to talk artificial intelligence and her latest investments into OpenAI. Catch that conversation with Carol Masser and Tim Stenovec at 4 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and television.
In the meantime, Karen, we just had this breaking news cross the Bloomberg terminal. The European Union has voted to impose tariffs as high as 45% on electric vehicles from China in a move that is set to increase trade tensions with Beijing. Sources say the European Commission, the bloc's executive arm, can now proceed with implementing the duties, which would last for 5 years.
And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The death toll from Hurricane Helene has climbed to 215, with many still unaccounted for. President Biden flew to the South yesterday to inspect the damage in Florida and then visiting a devastated farm in Ray City, Georgia, once again vowing to help stricken residents.
We're really in this together. We're separate states, but we're the United States of America.
In the Asheville area, the North Carolina National Guard, they're working around the clock to get supplies out into the field. But with hundreds of roads unpassable, troops can only go so far. Volunteers are using pack mules to get insulin up the mountain to families in need. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is blasting the Biden administration for its response to Helene. Campaigning in Saginaw, Michigan, the former president said the federal response to the storm has been the worst in history. And Trump responded after the Homeland Security Secretary warned FEMA may not have enough funding to make it through the season.
Kamala spent all her FEMA money, billions of dollars, on housing for illegal migrants.
However, a White House spokesman says FEMA disaster relief is completely separate from the agency's shelter and services program, which provides grants to cities. A jury has reached a verdict in the trial of 3 former Memphis police officers in the death of Tyree Nichols in 2023. The convicted officers were found guilty on accounts of witness tampering, and one was found guilty of civil rights violations. Prosecutors say the officers involved in the incident did not provide life-saving aid to Nichols. Ben Crump is one of the attorneys representing the Nichols family.
Tyree Nichols' death won't go unaccounted for. That is critical.
Nichols, who was 29, was brutally beaten during a traffic stop. He died from his injuries a few days later. Prosecutors in Los Angeles say they are reviewing new evidence in the case of the Menendez brothers to determine whether they should be serving life sentences for killing their parents in their Beverly Hills mansion more than 35 years ago. Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gasson says that attorneys for 53-year-old Eric Menendez and his 56-year-old brother Lyle have asked a court to vacate their conviction.
One possibility, what is being alleged by his lawyers, not by us, that there was evidence that had that evidence been presented to the jury, the outcome of this case would have been different.
A hearing is scheduled for November 29th. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. Here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. What a week it's been for the Mets and their fans, and it's not over yet. It started with that thrilling win Monday in Atlanta, the Francisco Lindor ninth-inning home run that put the Mets in the postseason. They had not homered in the 4 games since then, and they came up with the ninth inning of the decisive Game 3 in Milwaukee, having had only 2 hits, having not scored in 15 innings. The Brewers, thanks to solo home runs on consecutive pitches in the 7th inning, led 2-0. But Lindor walked. Brandon Nimmo singled, and up stepped Pete Alonso, free agent to be, so it could have been his final at-bat as a Met. It wasn't.
Williams sets. Here's the pitch. Swinging a fly ball to right field. Pretty well hit. Frelick back at the wall. He jumps. It's gone. He did it. He did it. Pete Alonso with the most memorable home run of his career. Pumps his fist as he rounds second. It's a 3-run homer. He's given the Mets a 3-2 lead.
Now he rose at it. Mets radio. They scored again. They won 4-2. It's their first series victory since 2015, and now this near 2-week-long road trip that has seen the Mets visit Atlanta twice and Milwaukee twice. Now has them in Philadelphia. First ever postseason series with the Phils. Best of 5 starts tomorrow, 4 o'clock, just ahead of the Yankees. Game 1 with Kansas City at the stadium. Also from baseball, Terry Francona going to be the new manager of the Cincinnati Reds. Overtime in the NFL, Atlanta beat Tampa Bay 36-30. Falcons QB Kirk Cousins, 42 of 58, 4 touchdowns, including the game winner in OT. Cousins threw for 509 yards, the 15th most in NFL history. Both teams are 3-2. The Chiefs are 4-0. They won't have top wideout Rashee Rice for at least 4 games. Placed on IR, he hurt his knee colliding with his teammate Patrick Mahomes as they tried to make a tackle after an interception. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports, Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. The White House may be breathing a pretty big sigh of relief this morning now that the dockworkers strike along the Gulf and East Coasts is on hold. President Biden is sounding hopeful that the longshoremen and the terminal operators will get to a deal.
Dock workers are going back to work. And the next 90 days, we're going to settle everything.
It was President Biden outside the White House last night saying that over the next 90 days, both sides will settle everything, in his words. Joining us for more this morning is Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries. Bill, good morning. This situation could have been more and more politically damaging for the White House the longer it went on. So what is the political impact potentially now that this strike is over for now?
Well, you're right, Nathan. I mean, what is the political impact? I mean, at the very top of that list of things would be that it takes a big headache and potentially worsening headache off the plate of the Democrats just 4 weeks before the election. Listen, the White House, the administration has a lot on its plate right now. It's dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. There's still, search and rescue going on for that. It's got this widening crisis in the Middle East. And really the last thing you need on top of that, or the last thing the administration wanted on top of that, was this crisis at the ports with potentially disrupting the delivery of some goods, with a lot of, thousands of workers going on strike, complaining about wages. It was not going to be a good look for the administration if that dragged on. And the economic costs were going to build up to potentially as much as $5 billion a day if this kept going. Even as it is, authorities are saying it will take about 12 days to clear the backlog of ships off of those southern and eastern U.S. ports that had built up in really just about 3 days of the strike.
So we could see a continued economic impact as we get through that backlog. But now that the sides have given themselves another 3 months to work out a new contract, is that going to be enough time, given how far apart both sides are on the issue of pay and automation?
Yeah, I think automation is going to be the real sticking point heading forward. They've set this January 15th deadline to deal with that. They do seem to have some kind of an agreement on the wage side in terms of a 61% wage increase over the next 6-year contract. I think there's still a lot of details there to be worked out, but that gets them part of the way towards a final deal. And then automation is going to be the second part of that. But I think, it gives them the time to reach a deal. It also kicks this well past the election. So if there is a strike that starts up in January, it's going to be either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris's problem to deal with, but it's not going to affect the election at that point.
And as you mentioned, the White House and Kamala Harris, to some extent, do have a lot on their plates, including Hurricane Helene and this escalating situation in the Middle East. Did the president make a pretty significant gaffe here with this comment that Israel is in discussions about going after oil targets in Iran?
Well, you saw how seriously the markets take those kind of comments. When the president of the United States speaks, markets listen. And he said that there is some consideration or discussions going on about whether Israel should hit Iranian oil facilities. And West Texas Intermediate jumped more than 5% right off the bat. Markets are very jittery about what could happen here. Iran, despite all these sanctions it's had on it for about 6 years now, Iran is producing, I think it's just over 3 million barrels of oil a day, mostly purchased by China, but that really helps alleviate some of the price pressure on the international market. If some of that capacity is taken offline, you'll get another spike in oil prices, and that translates to gasoline costs at home, and that's not a winner for anybody politically.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.